And this morning, the title of the message is Flood Stage Faith. And we're going to be in Joshua chapter 3 as we look into this new year. It was interesting. The other day on New Year's Eve, we told our kids who are 2 and 4, we told them, it's New Year's Eve. It's New Year's. Tomorrow, it's a new year. And our son looked at us and he said, well, what does that mean? I said, well, it's 2020 today, and tomorrow it's 2021. And he goes, okay. I said, Eli, aren't you excited about this? And he goes, well, what does that mean? What is that going to do? What are we going to do different in 2021? And I said, you know what? Very, very good question. Not a whole lot changes tomorrow. You got to stay up about 10 minutes later, but not a lot changes tomorrow, but we're very excited about this new year. And I think there's something about a new year, especially coming out of the year 2020. There's something in us that is exciting because we see something new on the horizon. And we want that new on the horizon. I remember going into last year, 2020, I thought, 2020, 2020 vision, like it's going to be just so clear and so great. And what we saw more clearly than ever is the deep difficulty that we have, that there's challenges, and those challenges came to the surface as things went in a way that we thought they never would. But I'm also reminded of God's faithfulness. And I remember last March when the news came out, we were going to go to online-only services. Things were changing, and they changed fast. And I thought, wow, we've been really going at this now with me as the lead pastor for about just over 2 years. Okay, Lord, what's that going to look like for us? And again and again and again throughout the year was reminded that he remains faithful even when we're faithless. And one thing that I can say over this last year is that God has been faithful. And he will continue to be faithful. And as we trust him for what's ahead, we're not through the water. Today we're going to talk about the water, the flood waters. We're not through the water, but what we can do in the midst of it is recognize and acknowledge God's faithfulness. And he is so, so faithful. Perhaps you've heard this before, that hindsight is 2020, which means often in our lives, hopefully, you can look back and you can see easily what you should have done differently. The idea there is that you hope that hindsight brings insight so that you can change the direction that you're going in based upon what happened previously. I was thinking about this new year and the things that we maybe in this last year didn't quite do the way that we would want to do them individually. And we look back and we go, okay, well, I hope hindsight brings insight. I hope that we can get better as we proceed forward. I hope that we can trust God more as we're pressing forward. But it would be so easy, I think, in our lives in this next year to just keep repeating the same things, coming up against the same walls, coming into the same difficulties. But what I believe is that the Lord wants us to do something that Paul talks about, which is opening the eyes of our heart, so that we would see him, so that we would see what he wants to do and where he wants to go and how he wants to lead us. Every year in the spring, it's coming. There's a different family of robins that likes to nest in our back tree. And once the nest is complete, Dad Robin perches up on the fence, and all day, for a few weeks, he will attack our sliding glass door. And he'll come and he'll hit it and hit the ground, and then he'll go back to the fence. And, just wait another 5 minutes. This year, I knew it like no other because I was working from home during the first part of that time, and I'm hearing this boom. I'm going, what is going on? Is our washer breaking or something? And I go back there and I'm seeing this robin up there, and it continues to smack into the window. Now, it's not good for the robin to do this. And it's not good for our window either. But the fact of the matter is that for a few weeks, it just continues to go back and do the same thing. Now, it's not attacking the window. What it's attacking is the image of itself in the window. It thinks that this is a threat to itself, and so it's attacking itself. I mean, bird brain, right? Like, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. If hindsight is not 20/20, if hindsight doesn't bring insight, then we keep smacking into that same thing and we keep hitting the floor and going back up. And I think it would be so easy for us in our lives, day in and day out, to do that very thing. But I'm asking the Lord, just for me, for us as a body, for you, that he would bring insight. That hindsight would be 20/20, that we could have insight for the things that we want to do. And if there's battles that we're fighting where we keep coming up against that glass door, that we would say, Lord, what do you want to show for? What do you want to show us in this? What do you want for us to see that we've not seen yet? Because there's a reason why we're not through the water yet. God, he is over all and he is in all. And if he's over all and he's in all, then I want endurance to have its perfect result in me. I want to be able to come to and say, God, you taught me so much. You taught me many things. So my son asked the question perfectly. It's 2021. What are we going to do differently? And my encouragement to you today is to have greater faith, to have flood stage faith. Flood stage is what Joshua and the Israelites were coming up against. We see in the beginning of Joshua chapter 3 that the Israelites are given directives from the Lord to enter into a new territory. In order to enter into that new territory, they were going to have to cross a river. It was 40 years prior that the Lord had called the Israelites to go into the promised land, this land that he had set apart for them, but they were faithless. They didn't trust God that he would get them into this land that he had promised them. And what we see is that people chose fear over faith. And that being the case, there was an entire generation of people, 40 years, that were going to pass away with the exception of two men, that was Joshua and that was Caleb, because they had faith in God. In Deuteronomy chapters 1 and 2, Moses begins to recount the journey of the Israelites when they're out in the desert. And in Deuteronomy 2, this really interesting verse comes up where the Lord says to them, you've circled this mountain long enough, now turn north. And it gives us this picture of their desert wanderings, that they were just circling this same mountain. It wasn't the place that God wanted them to be. It wasn't the place that God had for them to be. It wasn't the place that they even should have been. But yet, in that wandering, they were just circling that same mountain, going up on the perch, so to speak, attacking the same thing. But God says, turn north. And I think in our lives, there are mountains that we circle, and the Lord wants to draw us nearer to him and further in faith as we pursue him further. In Joshua chapter 1, the Lord gave specific orders to Joshua. He said, arise, tell the people that they're going to cross the Jordan River into the land that God was giving to the Israelites. And it's interesting because the Lord said to Joshua, I'm going to give you every place that you set your foot. But what we see in Joshua chapter 3 is the place where the Lord had for Joshua to set his foot was in a raging river at flood stage. In order to get to that place, the place that God was going to give them as they are here looking upon this river, is they would need to step in to a river in a season where it was the greatest strength, the greatest difficulty to cross. It was at flood stage. This river seemed uncrossable at flood stage. Flood stage is the level with which a water surface has risen to cause sufficient inundation of areas that are not normally covered by water. In other words, it's bigger, it's wider, it's higher than at any other point in the season. It's at flood stage. The Israelites had previously already faltered in faith. They had already been faithless, but now there was another lesson coming, and the Lord was going to lead them into the land of promises. But what they would have to do is step into this river at flood stage. And today we can look around and see many things in our lives and in our world currently at flood stage. Things are heightened, wider, higher. We look upon them and say, you want us to step into what right now? But what we understand is that when we walk by faith and not by sight, that God determines what's on the other side. And when we trust him and we walk by faith, no matter what things look like or how they seem, you and me, we walk with faith, not just faith, flood stage faith. That's what the Israelites were being called to, and that's what I believe me and you are being called to in the midst of this season we find ourselves in. So let's look to Joshua chapter 3, and we're going to read the entire chapter of Joshua chapter 3. Now, one of the things that you'll find in this chapter is it'll be like said from God to Joshua, then Joshua will say it to the people, and then it will show that the situation happens. So if it feels like it's repeating, it's repeating. But we're going to make sure that we understand what's going on and quite clearly. Verse 1, then Joshua rose early in the morning, he and all the sons of Israel, and set out from Shittim and came to the Jordan, and they lodged there before they crossed. At the end of 3 days, the officers went through the midst of the camp. And they commanded the people, saying, when you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, with the Levitical priests carrying it, then you shall set out from your place and go after it. However, there shall be between you and it a distance of about 2,000 cubits measure. Do not come near it, that you may know by which way you shall go, for you have not passed this way before. Then Joshua said to the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. And Joshua spoke to the priests, saying, take up the ark of the covenant and cross over ahead of the people. So they took the ark of the covenant and went ahead of the people. Now the Lord said to Joshua, this day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know, just as I have been with Moses, I will be with you. You shall, moreover, command the priests who are carrying the ark of the covenant, saying, when you come to the edge of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan. Then Joshua said to the sons of Israel, come here and hear the words of the Lord your God. By this you shall know that the living God is among you, that he will assuredly dispossess them before you, the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Hivite, the Perizzite, the Girgashite, the Amorite, and the Jebusite. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is crossing ahead of you into the Jordan. Now then, take for yourselves 12 men from the tribes of Israel, 1 man from each side, and it will come about when the soles of the feet of the priests who carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth, rest in the waters of the Jordan will be cut off, and its waters, which are flowing down from above, will stand in one heap. And we'll read the other verses of chapter 17 as we proceed. For Joshua and the Israelites, the Lord was going to make a way where there seemed to be no way. It didn't look like these millions of people would be able to cross this magnificent river at a time when it was at its greatest strength. But the reality is that God was leading the people back to the place that they should have gone 40 years ago, to cross over, to get to the other side, to get to the land of his promise that he had promised to them. But what was lacking 40 years earlier was what they needed now. That was faith. They lacked faith before, but this opportunity was an opportunity for them to now walk by faith. And the Lord wanted them to do just that. It was faith that they would need as they pressed forward and determined to follow the Lord like never before. And that's the first point. When it's flood stage, when things seem like never before, when we're seeing this word that we've heard a lot, unprecedented times, we need to follow the Lord like never before. When things are like they've never been, follow the Lord like you've never done. Follow the Lord like never before. It says in verse 2, after 3 days, the officers went throughout the camp. They said, when you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God and the Levitical priest carrying it, you are to move out from your positions and follow it. Then you will know which way to go. Why? Because you've never gone this way before. But keep a distance between them, and you. The people arrived to the Jordan River where they would cross. They had the other side in sight, the promised land that they had waited 40 years to go to. It was in sight. They could see it on the horizon. In between them and this promised land was this great river. Now, when they come to the side of the river to camp, what do? Do they plow through? No, they camped. They camped out. For 3 days, they camped out. They knew where they were headed. They knew where they needed to go. They knew where they were going to go. And the Lord said, wait right here. Wait right here on the side for 3 days. And we'll talk about how they would set themselves apart. Surely that would be a day where they would understand what they were about to do, where they would prepare their hearts, where they would prepare their minds, where they would get ready for what God was going to do. But it would also be a time in that 3-day period where they would see the impossibility of crossing this river in their own strength. They would understand it and they would know it, and they're required to wait. And sometimes I think when we see that with which we believe the Lord has for us, when we can see it on the horizon, we ask ourselves the question, why wait? Why not just go for it? We're right here. Why the delay? I'm just going to plow through in my own strength. I'm going to walk this thing out rather than trusting the Lord each step of the way. There are many answers, determinations to the destinations that are actually probably good destinations, things sometimes that the Lord has for us. But every step of the way, we have to still walk by faith. So often, this particular pursuit, the thing that we know we are to do, the last thing we are willing to do is wait. Often, if there's no quick solution, if we can't make it happen yesterday or even tomorrow, we're not willing to go. If there's no fast pass. Have you ever been to Disneyland? Have you been to Disneyland recently? Because when I was a kid, they didn't have these things called fast passes, but now they have these things called fast passes. The fast pass is the fast pass. That means that you get this pass for a particular ride, and when you do, you blow through the line. They get you right to the front, you can get on the ride, and you can go. Now, when I was younger, it was still a crowded place, but you'd wait, sometimes an hour to get on a ride. Now it's sometimes even more than that. And we had the opportunity to go a couple of years ago, Kathy and I did. And you have this app and you look at it. And there are some rides, like nostalgic rides that I would have really loved to go on that day, but I didn't. You want to know why? No fast pass. There's no fast pass for that one. I'm not going on that one. I'm going to wait for that thing. It's cool, but it's not that cool. It's not worth, waiting for, of course. And I think that there are so many things in our Christian life, so many places that the Lord wants to take us that we're not willing to go because we have to wait. Because we don't have a fast pass for this thing. And so, that's pretty cool. But I got to go. I don't have the time for that. And so we don't even begin to walk down that path. Or when he takes us down to this place and says, hey, I want you to wait right here. I want you to see exactly what that is. When that's the reality, sometimes we just turn around. We don't pursue that with which the Lord is calling us to. And so we have to take heart and we have to trust God and we have to walk by faith. There's a reason for the wait. He's working, I've said it before, he's working in the waiting. We sing that song sometimes, God's in the waiting, and he's working in that waiting. But if we're not willing to wait, then that's tied to our willingness to walk by faith. When God says wait, are we willing to do that? Psalm 27, 13-14, I would have lost heart unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Here's what the psalmist says, wait on the Lord. Be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. It says, I would have lost heart. And I think sometimes we lose heart because in that waiting, we're not quite sure. We're not quite sure if there's good on the other side of that. But when it comes to the Lord and we wait on him, we can trust him. And we can walk by faith and not by sight. In Numbers 13, 40 years earlier, Moses had sent 12 spies to go and look at the land. This is the land that now they're at again 40 years later. He sent the 12 spies to go and spy out the land to see if it was a good land. God had said it was this land that was flowing with milk and honey, a beautiful land, a fruitful land. And so Moses says, we're going to send the spies. And they're going to go, they're going to look at the land, they'll bring back some fruit from the land, and we'll see how good this land actually is. And so they all went, 12 spies went, I just put up two, peace. They went to the same land, all 12 of them went to the same land, and this is what they came back and said. They said, this land, it flows with milk and honey, but the people are strong, and the cities are fortified, and there's difficulty there. There's giants in the land. They're of great height. In other words, they knew that the land ahead was good, but they did not trust that God would be good to them. It's a good land, but there's difficulty. And how many times do we turn around because we know that there's a good land, but there's great difficulty? They saw grapes, pomegranates, and figs. The clusters of grapes were so fruitful that it took two men with a pole between them to carry one cluster of grapes. I mean, these are some pretty amazing grapes. When I go to heaven, I want to try one of those. Just, I like grapes, just all in on that thing. Like, these had to be some pretty huge grapes going on. And they saw big grapes, but they also saw big men. And they saw robust cities, walled cities, robust militaries, and the people grumbled against Moses. Said, you're leading us into death. You're leading us into difficulty. Joshua and Caleb saw a good land. They were ready to trust God. They said, he will bring us there. He will get us to that place. It is a fruitful land. They're going, yeah, it's a fruitful land. But there's giants in that land, and 10 were trusting the wrong source. As noted at that time, they were faithless. That's when the Lord says, this generation, it's going to pass away. Joshua and Caleb, they're going to remain. Why? Because they were willing and ready to walk by faith. And here's Joshua. He's now the leader of this people. And he's willing to walk by faith, even though he could see a flood stage river. They needed to wait on the Lord. And here's what it says. After 3 days, they would see, it says, the Ark of the Covenant. So the Ark of the Covenant, the Levitical priest, the priest would carry the Ark of the Covenant. And what the people are told is when you see the priest carrying the Ark of the Covenant moving, you move. You follow the Ark of the Covenant. Now, the Ark of the Covenant had a very specific purpose amongst the people. There's a lot to that. It was built according to God's instruction, but it was the representation and the place of God's presence amongst his people. So basically they're saying, when God's presence moves, you move. You follow it. You get up from your place and you go. When this Ark of the Covenant moves, people, you move. So the priest would be carrying it. So they were to move when the presence of the Lord moved, but they were also to keep a distance between them and the Ark. It says 2,000 cubits. That was like just right around about a half a mile. That's how far ahead this thing needed to be. Why? Because it says, you have never gone this way before. You've never gone this way before. And so you have to follow like never before. In other words, don't push Don't push me. Follow me. We all know this year, physical, social distancing, keeping some room. When it comes to following God, we need some divine distancing. We need to make sure that we know that the Lord is in the lead, and we're not moving until he moves. I'm not going to do that thing until the Lord says to do that thing. And I'm going to make sure that there's plenty of room between me and him, because I've never gone this way before. I mean, do you want to talk about following? I do. Like, we need that. We need this. We need distance between us and God. Because you better believe that within that half a mile, there's going to be all kinds of voices, all kinds of opinions, all kinds of people saying, no, that the Lord's not in that. The Lord's not in this. No, the Lord's going this way. You're missing the boat. And what you have to do is be sure. You have to know that you're not moving unless God's moving. And when he moves, you get up, you follow, but you keep a distance between you and God. How easy it is to try to get in front of God, to try to get in front of his presence or his leading in your life. Don't ever do that. Trust the Lord, follow him. It says, do not come near it, so that you may know the way that you shall go. You've never been this way before. I think that would be true of the time that we're in, a flood stage. We've never been this way before. We've never been this way before, so we have to follow like never before. Isaiah 43:19, behold, I will do something new. Now it will spring forth. Will you not be aware of it? I will even make a roadway in the wilderness, rivers in the desert. Psalm 32:8, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. Let's go back to Isaiah 43. Behold, I will do something new. Now it will spring forth. Will you not be aware of it? Why would we not be aware of the new that God wants to do? Because he's not in front. Because we've gotten out in front, and God wants to do something new, but we're trying to lead. We're trying to lead rather than be led. Romans 8:14, for those who are led by the Spirit of God, those are the children of God. Far too often we make assumptions regarding what is good and the timing of such. Leave room in your life and wait until you can see God moving clearly. And that may mean you have to camp out a little bit longer. If you're like me, you just want to go, you want grab and go. You want the fast pass, but I'm telling you, it's very, very important that we keep God in the lead. When I'm at the store these days, social distancing, I'm waiting to see, is this person which way are they going? Sizing up the situation. And I go the way so that we can, make sure that we got the thing. That's what we need, divine distancing. So often we don't see what the Lord is doing because we get ahead of him. Make sure you're in the right place where you can hear and where you can see. And until you can see clearly, don't move. Interesting about the store, at Costco, the produce section comes after the freezer section. Oh, it's been bad this year, y'all. I've brought home some bad fruit and vegetables. Because when I come out of that cold area, my glasses are fogged up. That's my excuse, at least. Guys, these tomatoes are rotten. I'm like, my glasses were all fogged up. I have this mask. It's like this real situation. If you wear glasses, you're getting fogged up. Adam, who does a lot of our tech, he gave me these wipes that they leave this film on my glasses. I don't like that either. I'll say, I'll take the fog, but I don't want the fog or the film. I got to wait. I got to wait until it clears up next time and make sure these things are right. Man, if we walk into the fog, if we let the film block our eyesight, we're going to pick and choose the wrong things. But if we wait until we see God clearly, then we're going to go in the right direction. And what he says in verse 5 is, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. To consecrate is to set apart, It's to prepare. And in preparation, they'll set themselves apart for the Lord. And as God's children, as Christians, as followers of Christ, that is what we need to set ourselves apart for. Set ourselves apart for the Lord, so that the Lord can do wonders among you. And when you live in such a way that you set yourself apart for him, you're willing and able to stand where he sends. The Lord said to Joshua that where he was going to send them was into this raging river. And when they got to the river, they were to go down to the river and they were to stand in the river. They weren't going to look at the river. God says, when the priests go down, tell them to stand in the water. And they would know, it says, that God was among them because he would move in that moment. As soon as they set foot in the river, God was going to move. And the river would stand in one heap. And so it would stand up in one heap. But the reality of the situation is that the people were being told one thing, but they were seeing something completely different. They were being told, you're going to go down to the waters are going to stop up. But as they're looking at this river at flood stage, and I don't know how much river experience you have, but look, a very narrow part of the Deschutes would be very tough to swim across. I don't know if you've ever tried it, but you will get taken downstream. I mean, you're talking about millions of people trying to cross this thing. This was not looking good. The Lord is saying, this is what you are to do, but what they are seeing is impossibility. They were to proceed forward with flood stage faith, both feet in the water. And they could not see how. They could not see where. All they knew was who. And that's the who that they were to walk according to. For me and for you, there are many times where the situation can seem the same, where we're told to walk by faith and not by sight. But in the midst of deep difficulty, we are hearing something different than we're seeing, and we're going, how could that ever be possible? How could that ever come to pass? And the answer is not always clear. 40 years earlier, they wouldn't have done it. 40 years earlier, they would have said, nope, we're not going to go there. But what they had learned, what hindsight had done for them, was bring insight. We've got to walk by faith. That's all we got, is to walk by faith. We've tried it the other way. And I think for us, when hindsight brings insight, so that we can walk by faith, these questions come. And surely, I don't know, I mean, I would imagine that they had questions as well. But I surely know that we do. What if I step out and nothing happens? What if I step into that water and they don't stop up? I'll feel like a failure. I'll feel like a fool. What if I walk by faith and I fall flat on my face? And you've heard me say this before, so what we do when those questions win is we stay in the wilderness where it's dusty dry. We're not trusting the Lord. It's wilderness dry over there. But the Lord had said to them, you've circled this mountain long enough. Go. And for you and for me, there are probably things in our lives associated with this walk of faith that we've been circling long enough. And the Lord's saying, go. Go to the place that I have for you. Trust me in this. What if I look like a fool? Walk by faith. Trust me in this. 40 years earlier, the Israelites, they had crossed the Red Sea. And when they got down to the sea, the waters were parted. I mean, Moses stretched out his hand. The waters were parted. They were parted. It was this open door. Welcome. Come on in. Let's go. This time was different. This time they needed to step in first. And what I find is that so often in our lives, the reality is we have to step in first. Because the language of eternity, do you want to know what it is? It's faith. and we begin to speak the language of eternity, the language that the Lord wants us to lean upon when we begin to walk by faith and not by sight. Salvation is by grace through faith. Salvation's by grace through faith. And so we have this great faith. Without faith, Hebrews 11:6, it's impossible to please him. Oh, I want to please him, so I want to walk by faith. Take him at his word. And that's what the people would need to do. Take him at his word and stand where he sent. I believe the call for you and for me is to stand where he sends today. The Ark of the Covenant was moving, but it was headed towards deep waters. And when we see that happening, when it's headed toward deep waters, it can be easy to say, let's wait another day or two until things calm down. Let's go that direction in another season when it's not flood stage, when it looks more possible for us to cross in our own strength. I mean, the Israelites could have said, well, we've waited this long, 40 years. We might as well wait another 4 weeks until things settle down, until it calms down. But that's not what the Lord wanted to do. The Lord wanted to call them to flood stage faith. And he wants to call us to flood stage faith. Not this time, Joshua. Joshua was going to walk by faith. And so what it says in verse 15 is, as soon as the priest who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away, a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarethan, where the water flowing down from the Sea of Arabah, that is, the Dead Sea, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. The priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan. They stood on dry ground while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. Joshua, the priests, the people took God at his word, and his word was true. As soon as the priests touched the water's edge, the Lord stopped up the water. They stepped in across from Jericho, but God was working upstream to make a way. And this is important to catch, because when flood stage faith is required and you've made the determination to walk like never before, to follow him like never before, to set yourself apart for him, when you're willing to stand where he sins and put your feet in, it's important in that to, in all your ways, acknowledge him. To acknowledge him future and acknowledge what he's done in the past. Where you've been, who he is, and who he will be. In all your ways, acknowledge him. When you need flood stage faith, in all your ways, acknowledge him. For Joshua and the Israelites and the priests, God was working out of sight. This says that the river rose in one heap. Now, you might think that they step in this water right here and they see this wall right next to them. Maybe that's the picture you get in your mind. I don't know, when I first read it, that's the picture I got. Like, oh, this is cool, right? Jordan River, Air Jordan, right? Like, it's way up there. Thank you. And so you have this standing up in this one heap behind you. You just kind of walk through on this valley. It's cool. Oh, man, I see some fish or whatever. But that's not what was happening, because the Bible gives us a specific geographic location as to where the waters were stopped up. It was 17 miles upstream. The waters stopped 17 miles upstream. They couldn't see where the waters stopped up. God was working out of sight, beyond the place where they could see when they put their feet into the water. The river did not stop right in front of them. It stopped far beyond them. And that's what we have to realize in our lives, is that when we walk by faith, sometimes we go, man, I don't see it. I don't see anything happening. Would you please leave room for God to work 17 miles upstream? Would you please allow for God to do what only he can do? Because that's what happens. God works in ways that we cannot see. And when we walk by faith, likely That's exactly how he's working for you and for me. And so you have to wait, and you have to be patient, and you have to walk by faith and know that God is working. God's working. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. The Hebrew word for acknowledge is yada. It means to know, to learn and know, to know by experience, or to consider. To know something by experience. I acknowledge God. I learn and know and acknowledge him. I trust in him in all my ways, and I understand that he will make straight paths. And when he determines what's straight in my life, that's exactly what I want. For them, they would get straight across, but God was working upstream. And when you acknowledge that God is working, it is often upstream. God has done great things in all your ways. Acknowledge him. Acknowledge that he is good. Acknowledge what he's done, and acknowledge that he will do good things. He is good. We sang the song. Psalm 105:5 says, remember his wonders which he has done. Remember the good things, the wonders which he has done. And after the Israelites crossed the Jordan River, they would do just that. If you flip to Joshua chapter 4, what you see is that the Lord told Joshua to choose 12 men that represented the 12 tribes of Israel. And what they were to do is they were to go back into the place where they crossed and take 12 stones. And they would take these 12 stones, they would pick up these stones, and these 12 stones would be taken to the place that they were going to camp on the other side of the river that they had just crossed. These 12 stones would serve as a memorial. This memorial would be these stones that they would set down, and these 12 stones would be arranged in such a way that when people looked at them, they would go, that's what God did. God did that. God got us through. God got us into the promised land. We walk by faith and not by sight. And so they would set this up as a memorial that the Lord made a way where there seemed to be no way. He says, Joshua, get 12 guys, have them go collect some rocks. These were stones. They had to carry them on their shoulder. You know, whenever we go on a trip, our son, he collects rocks, okay? So we come back with like a bucket of rocks. And he's got a rock memorial in our backyard. And we know we got these at different places, but he'll collect these different rocks. And so we remember where we went. I might suggest to him next time we go somewhere to set up a memorial there and leave it. This is a good idea here. Anyway, monumental, but they're meaningful to him. And for the Israelites, set up a monument. And I love the picture. To set something up so that you can remember what God did, what God alone did. And you know, if you compare God's monuments to man's monuments, you see something quite different. I mean, think of man's monuments. When you commission a man to build a monument, it's high budget, it's high dollar, it's very ornate. I mean, think of some of the monuments, the Eiffel Tower, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, the Statue of Liberty, the Taj Mahal, the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. I mean, these things are pretty amazing. And many of those monuments symbolize something, but I don't really know what. God says, go collect some rocks. Why? Why would that be the monument? Because I believe that God doesn't want the monument greater than the moment where we walked by faith and not by sight. And we can get so hung up on the wrong things, but what we look at, these 12 stones, what they would represent, set them up, he says, so that the people will remember, and guess what? So that your children will remember, the generations to come. Moms, Dads, as we're in flood stage, what are you setting up so that your children will remember for generations to come that, man, we had a tough year. But look what God did. Oh, church, we've had a tough year. But we got to look at what God did. And it's still at flood stage. And so we have to look at what God is doing. And so my challenge to you today, as you walk with flood stage faith, is to begin to set up memorials in your life, in your family, before the Lord. I don't know, go collect some rocks and say, these rocks. Put some notes around your house. Put some notes on your phone that will remind you a couple months from now, just pop up. God did this amazing thing, so that you can be reminded of the good things God did. Why did they need to be reminded of that? Because Jericho was on the horizon. And they were going to face battles. They had battles ahead, and I think that it's easy for us, and I'm not trying to be doom and gloom by any means. But I think we're all just trying to get through this season, and we have to continue to walk by faith. There's going to be more in store. And so let's set up memorials in our lives to say, this is what God did. And this is who God is. And he's going to get us through. And let's set up those memorials of faith. If you work a job at your desk, I don't know, put a few stones on your desk. And maybe someone will come up to you if you're at your office, and they'll go, what do you got all those rocks for? Those are the good things God did for me this year. And they'll go, okay. But later they might come back and say, you know, it's been a tough year. Can you tell me something good? You don't know. But I'm encouraging you to acknowledge him in this day, in this difficult day, to walk by faith, not by sight, to stand where he sends, and to leave room between you and between him so that he alone can lead you where he alone wants to lead you. It's time for us, church, to rise up in faith, to declare the distinction of who we will be as God's people, and how we will stand in a difficult day, and how we will proceed forward in a difficult day. And I'm encouraging you to walk with faith. But right now, we need that flood stage faith. To be willing to, yes, Lord, I hear you. I'm going to go there. I'm going to pursue you. And he will make a way. And while you're on your way, I'm telling you, pick up some rocks so that you can take them to the other side with you. And you can say, God did it. I don't know about you, but last March, when this all hit, I thought, I don't see it, but God did. And God does. Let's pick up some stones, church, and let's remind ourselves of the good things that he's done. And so as we close in prayer, just before the Lord, maybe, we don't have rocks in here, but maybe you just pick up some things before the Lord. Maybe 4 or 5 things that you can say, Lord, I'm thankful for this, that you did in this last year. Oh, it'd be easy to point out the things that we're not so thankful for. But what are 5 things that the Lord did, and find a way to memorialize that in your life. Don't make the memorial greater than the memory, but make this a memorial of God's faithfulness in your life, that he's getting us through and he's gotten us through. Oh, let it be true. So let's bow our heads and let's just think, let's just count. I don't know, maybe you can find 1 thing or 2 things or 3 or 4, just as many things as you can to say, Lord, this is my memorial to this year. Thank you for that. And I'm going to keep looking back on that as we continue with flood stage faith.